Hello, everybody. I'm going to ask the first question, and then we'll just make a conversation from there. So I had the pleasure of watching you, Ken, as you went through, is it 3 years of working on Frenemies, and the world changed right in front of you, sort of along the way. Could you just talk a little bit about what you saw? So the whole idea of Frenemies, obviously, is that in the advertising business, the ad agencies are both partners and competitors with so many of the other providers for corporations particularly. So do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I came into the world I wrote about in this book a bit naive. I'd covered media and communications for New Yorker, done 11 books, none about advertising. And yet I kept on thinking that old Watergate adage, follow the money. And when I looked at things I had written about, like newspapers and magazines and radio and other communications, and saw how they were falling off a cliff, they were falling off a cliff in large part because advertising dollars were fleeing. And as I got into the world of advertising, the phrase frenemies was one that was popularized by Martin Sorrell. In fact, it was invented by Walter Winchell in 1948, who, looking at the Soviet Union and the competition, said that they're our frenemy. But advertising agencies have enormous number, as Anne has suggested. PR agencies are in the advertising business. Consulting companies are in the advertising business. Google and Facebook are disintermediating them. Clients increasingly are taking stuff in-house. You go to New York Times and you see over 300 people in sales, and yet a third of them are an ad agency creating ads and bypassing the agency. But I came to feel, just to sum up, that the biggest frenemy and the one that is most disruptive is the public. The consumer doesn't like being interrupted, and I saw the last panel people talking about overstuffing those television ads in those minutes, one of the reasons for Netflix's popularity. But one of the questions I was left with at the end of 3 years of reporting in is, how do you reach people who don't want your pre-rolls, don't want your banner ads, don't want your 30-second spots, don't want to be interrupted, particularly on the dominant device of their lives, the cell phone, without it feeling like an intrusion? And I think that's a fundamental question I have. And which leads me to question you. I mean, you oversee marketing and advertising for Bank of America. What's your answer to that? How do you overcome that aversion that the public has to advertising?
Well, I have heard a little bit of what's covered here today, so you've covered it pretty well. But from a client perspective, you have to think of everything. So it is true that live events are still very useful. And so we advertise on live events because you're not likely to fast forward through the 8th inning or the 4th quarter, or et cetera. So live events are always important. Recognizing also, though, the people are usually using a device at the same time, so we're trying to advertise there too, which is a little more complicated. In our case, and in most large clients' cases, we have, not only do we have internal, big investments in data and analytics, but also using some of the consultants that are companies that you listed up there earlier. And so we're better at targeting. We understand everything from addressable TV to how to hit the consumer directly. The problem with that is you may make a sale, but it's kind of transactional. So your data may be good. You may know I can do the next product to buy analytics. You may be right about it, but you lose a little of the magic of any brand. I don't care what the brand is. If you don't have a platform to speak more globally about the value of the company, and that's hard. And that's, if with each day this becomes more difficult because people are getting rid of ads in any way possible. I really do think that's never going to change now. And live events will at some point figure out how not to have us in there either. And it's a constant challenge, which means that the brand needs to infiltrate in other ways.
Like?
Through employees being good ambassadors, through your public policy, through what the media says about you. In other words, you have to have a 360-degree look at that brand, and you have to be thinking about every interaction that's going to take place, every complaint, because it all adds up. Because word of mouth is viral now. Word of mouth, I can't tell you something and then you decide not to use the bank, or you decide to use the bank. You'll then go on Facebook and spew it to the world. So I have to be thinking about that all the time, and we do think about it all the time. And so does every other brand.
Do you also think a lot about the duopoly, the Google and Facebook and
Yeah.
Amazon?
Yeah, we think about them
And
all
how
the
do you
time.
think about them?
Well, I think about them differently. So Google still has a lock on search. And so from an advertiser's point of view, they're always going to get a lot of money because of search. Just that's they still have a lock on it. That could change, but right now they
But
have
yet, I've seen figures that say that if you go on Amazon, 50% of the people who search for a product do it on Amazon, not on Google. That's a dagger in the heart of Google.
Yeah, but not for a brand like ours. So a bank, you're not going on Amazon for a bank. So it depends on your brand. If it's a product, it's a death knell, but it's not for other kinds of entities. So for us, Google's really important. Facebook is an interesting case in that Facebook is, and YouTube is really important as a destination. So Google, in terms of both for search and in terms of destination, YouTube are both important. Facebook's different. Facebook, it's more complicated with Facebook, and Facebook has had more problems. So their statistics on advertising are okay. I think that they've just faced more, at least for a brand like ours, there are more problems.
You have, I mean, one of the things that I thought a lot about as I'm reporting my book is the privacy issue. And I would go into clients or platforms, and I say, so what is the answer to the question, how do you make it feel like it's not an interruption, your ads? And they say, well, we'll have so much information about you, we'll be able to target ads for you, and it won't feel like an ad, it'll feel like a service. Mm-hmm. So I said, for instance, and they said, well, you know, we know you bought a sport jacket at Barney's 2 months ago, and we have your GPS, Ken, so we know you're only 2 blocks from Barney's. And if you go into Barney's now, we'll give you 20% off on a new sport jacket. So then the question becomes, will Ken, when he hears that, will he say, this is a great service for me, I love this discount? Or will he say, this is really creepy? Mm-hmm. What is your answer to that?
It's only creepy if it's not something you wanted. I think that if you thought, I'd like 20% off of a sport coat, you think, I'm good with that.
But how do you know I wanted it?
Well, predictive modeling. We don't know that you want it, but we know that you shop there. We know that that's, so Barney's cares about that, so does a financial services company, because you're going to use some currency to buy it. Therefore, we're just as interested as Barney's is.
But do you worry that there's a line you can't cross, and what is that line?
Well, the line you can't cross, first of all, it depends on your industry. We have firewalls, so we can't share any data with a third party. Having said that, we like to see what the third party has, so we do like to see, Google and Facebook both have walled gardens too, so they sort of spoon feed us what they have, and that becomes unattractive after a while.
Because it's partial.
Of course it is.
Right.
And so we have just built up, we and most other big brands that can afford billions of dollars of investment in analytics have built our own analytics. And so we know, of course, we know if you did buy it. We know how often you buy it. We know if you're our customer, if you bought anything else somewhere else. So data and analytics is the name of the game, because everything, in terms of just how clients spend their money, so much more is spent on some form of addressable marketing, one-to-one, either some direct fashion, and it's very cost efficient, and it's quite effective. The problem is you're leaving the brand to be defined by the media and others, which is not a good thing. And the more time that goes by, the group before us was talking about will there be advertising, and I agree there'll be no advertising on Netflix first run, or maybe with Amazon, but they have to, I mean, just to monetize or amortize the cost of something, they're going to have to syndicate it the way the networks used to syndicate, and that's where we think we can advertise.
You know, one of the things that when I started my book 3 years ago, Martin Sorrell and others in the advertising world would talk about how we like the idea of Snapchat. We're pouring some money into Snapchat because we want to create competition for the digital giants like Google and Facebook. Well, Snapchat has passed its prime in that. And now they're saying, well, Amazon. But Amazon is growing exponentially. And
Right.
do you worry about Amazon? Or do you see it as a useful competitor to Facebook and Google?
Well, I see Amazon differently. Amazon is a marketplace of merchandise, so as a financial services firm, I like Amazon. I don't like it when they start competing with us, which they'll do.
By creating banks?
Well, some currency. So, I mean, that's inevitable.
So they're just a frenemy, in effect?
Could be, not right now, but could be. Everything's a frenemy. Speaking of frenemies, the people that you highlighted, some of them are gone. I mean, they are giants in the industry, or they're certainly players in the industry. Martin, Irwin Gottlieb, even
Les Moonves.
But even, I mean, a brand like GE, which was indestructible, seems totally. I mean, what do you make of all that?
Change. It's me as a journalist. I have no responsibility for anything. So change is great material for my books. And someone said in one of the reviews of my books, they said, "But does this date Auletter's book that Martin Sorrell, for instance, is gone?" And in the book, in the last chapter of the book, I asked Martin Sorrell. I said, "You're going to turn 73 next year. Do you think about leaving?" And he said, "They'll have to shoot me to get me out of here." Well, 2 months later, after my book had gone to bread, they shot him, and he left. But him departing, or Irwin Gottlieb departing, or Les Moonves departing, doesn't change the fact that these are historic figures in the advertising world. 33 years, Martin Sorrell started and built the largest holding company, most successful holding company, and that's an imprint he's had. So I just see it as change, but it doesn't change the fact that he was a giant, important figure in the advertising world.
Yeah, but what about, I forget what year your book, Three Blind Mice, How the Networks Lost Their Way.
91.
Okay, so what do you make? So that's GE is involved there. I mean, they enter stage right then, right?
In '86, the three networks were purchased by three giant companies, GE purchasing NBC.
Okay, and now GE, sort of during your Frenemies book and after. I mean, what do you make of that arc?
It's life. I mean, that's what gives.
Well, that's
that
not what
fuels.
any brand wants to hear. That's like.
No, but I'm not a brand. You are.
Yeah, no,
You've
I
got to
know.
worry about it. I don't have to worry about anything. I've got no responsibility. I'm just following your world, and it's fascinating. And if GE goes from, I mean, I had great time following them as they came into NBC, and they tried to change the culture of NBC, and were actually shocked by the culture of NBC. In part, they were right. In part, they were wrong. They were right about the fact that they found out that NBC News was producing half of the programs they produced, or the pieces they did, not programs, the piece they did for news. The average cost was $50,000, and yet only half of them ever aired. And they said, this is crazy. And they were right about that. On the other hand, these were suits. These were people who didn't understand that news is a different business. Larry Tisch, who was then the head of CBS, when he went the first time to visit bureaus overseas, he goes to the Rome bureau of CBS, and he says to Howard Stringer, who was the acting vice president, number 2 in news at the time, he said, Howard, these people are just sitting around. What are they doing? And Howard tried to explain to him, well, actually reporters wait for phone calls to be returned, wait for their planes to take off, wait for correspondence to be, that's what reporters do. We spend a lot of time waiting. And business people don't necessarily understand that. And so that culture clash was great fodder for me as a journalist.
Yeah, but from a brand perspective, what you're always trying to do is stay current and also anticipate the future. I mean, Bank of America obviously went through along with other banks, but we particularly went through a chaotic time of the financial crisis. I do feel like that perhaps kept us on our toes in present years more than maybe other categories. I'm saying the financial services industry. But if we're not ever vigilant, whether it's a payments area or even in data, you could lose ground.
But isn't this what Clayton Christensen wrote that book about, the Harvard professor,
Yes.
The Innovator's Dilemma, that you have a legacy business, an existing business, and you want to protect it because it's generating most of your profits and your bonuses as a CEO. And on the other hand, you see digital or some other upstarts coming along, and how much do you take from legacy business and put it into the new business? How do you deal with the innovator's dilemma? How do you address that as vice chair of this giant company?
Well, I think the biggest change for us has been how much money we spend in technology. I mean, it's the one place where we will spend whatever it takes. And so that...
Even siphoning it from existing?
Yes. So, and particularly on cyber. So the difference in technology, because it's both a destination and a transportation system, I mean, so much of our business is done through a mobile app today. If we had not innovated to the degree we needed to, we would have been one of those brands that goes away. So, I mean, you just stay current. But I'm mindful of the time, and we said we would take questions. Did you have anything that you wanted to cover?
No.
Okay. So are there any questions that are here in the...
Well, while we wait for a question, let me ask you one. When you look at GE, which you raised,
Right.
what was their mistake? What they failed to do?
I don't know what they failed to do. I mean, the thing is that I always thought GE, and I still think GE is a great company, but I think they were leading with what they were not doubling down on. So they were talking about the environment when I think they were really doing other kinds of business in energy. And I think if you're saying one thing and doing another, it can be confusing in the marketplace because you don't know where you're going to put your money. I mean, that's a simplistic version of things, but I do think that.
Questions? We have one there.
And as you talk about your spend in technology, what are your goals for the Erica digital messaging platform?
Well, that's new. So that's anticipating. It's very basic. Erica is at the moment very basic. It allows you from an audio perspective to check your balances, make a transfer, et cetera, et cetera. It can anticipate some things. You're spending, you spent this on this, or that there's a Starbucks nearby because we see that you do that all day long. It's meant as a practical tool. It's certainly not going to dissuade you from using your Amazon or your Google device, but rather specific to your financial services, which we can't share with a third party, so you can't check it at the moment that way. This is just a way for you to check it easily. In the same way that Zelle is intended to be a superior P2P facility so that we're not losing business to Venmo, because on a Venmo, you still need a bank account. So you're still using JP or us or Citi as your bank account. They're just, making the money on the top. I just want to go back to GE because I think about them a little bit, and I think GE is going to be, I think they'll do what many of us did in the financial services industry. They will consolidate and then regrow because their fundamentals were always so strong. Everybody emulated them for so long. I really think the fundamentals are still there.
But the stock price for a long time has not been there.
Right, but that may be because they're not focused. They may have wandered away from their core competencies. when we wander, I mean, I think anyone, when you wander away from your core competency, you start to run into trouble. Sorry.
Both of you perhaps, but Ken, having studied the media agency world for 3 years, and since Sir Martin has left, WPP is unwinding a lot of their investments, talking about spinning off divisions like Kantar and others.
Right.
How does the agencies, how do they reinvent themselves? And how do they continue to service the advertisers that are taking a lot of things in-house, like programmatic?
I mean, you look at, I don't know the answer to that. I know that you got to throw things against the wall and see what sticks. One of the agencies I followed in the book is RGA. And RGA basically says we don't define ourselves as an ad agency, even though they do ads. They do heavy in digital, but they're heavy in design, office design, you know, et cetera, for companies, and do that. VC, they invest money in companies and then partner with digital companies and mentor the companies they invest in, bring them into the office. They have a huge office facility. So they say that we are not just marketing and communicating with consumers. We're basically trying to help other businesses. And you look at Gary Vaynerchuk of VaynerMedia. I mean, he's a guy who's you know, uses a social network in a very impressive and aggressive way. But I think you need, and then there are people who believe, like Vayner does, I'm not sure he's right, small has an advantage over large, over the holding companies, because we can move faster. On the other hand, if you look at some of the things that, Ann is different. You have like 6 agencies and you coordinate them. GE did the same thing. But you look at other, you know, you look at what McDonald's did. Let's have it all in one. You look at what AT&T did. One super agency, what Ford used to do with WPP, or started that. So I don't know what the answer is, but again, we'll learn what the answer is over the next several years.
We've done both. We've consolidated, and we've, as we are now, working with many agencies. I think that agencies will do a couple of different things. They have to, if they aren't content providers, I mean, they do ads, but that's going the way of the dinosaur, the 30-second spots. So their partnerships with content providers or becoming content providers, flattening their organization, quicker to market, and also being better at the things that they didn't do in the past. So the data and analytics, the public relations, the public policy, the insights group, but not make those like a big ta-da, like we're going to bring someone special in today and we're going to tell you about them. I mean, that's, they need to show up that way now.
Can you talk a little bit about...
Wait for the mic.
Can you talk a little bit about the inside baseball of the migration of the brands in terms of Bank of America, Merrill Lynch to Bank of America now? And how
Can I talk a little bit about what?
the migration of your brands,
Oh, the brands.
in terms of Merrill Lynch and Bank of America.
Well, I'd say Merrill Lynch is the Intel chip. It is the wealth management, investment services piece of Bank of America from a consumer point of view, from the mass market to the wealthy. From the corporation's point of, from a business to business, investment banking, capital markets, Bank of America, Merrill Lynch is a combined name. I know is long, but so is JP Morgan Chase. And the reason for combining them is people like to know you have the heft and the intel together.
That's the last question.
Ann, question for you. You mentioned live sports or live events. Other than that, how important is content to you? Is it just a matter of delivering the results you need, and how important is it, and why is it important to you other than just the results it's delivering for you as a marketer?
Content's key. It's just that you can disaggregate advertising from much of content other than live events. So it isn't that we don't care about the content, we do, because it is a destination for people. It's all about content. It's just that pre-roll is, I mean, we know what pre-roll is. You're just waiting for it to be over. That's not exactly a selling proposition for an advertiser. So if we can in some way become, you know, the Hulu model is pretty good, or the Second Life in the networks where you'll take telescope the advertising down to just 2 ads or something, we have some hope that you'll hang in there for that. So the content is key, but most consumers just want it to go away. Therefore, I mean, I love content as much as anyone, but I'm watching HBO or Amazon or Netflix, and there's no ad there, and I don't see an ad happening, other than I do think it will get syndicated. One more? Okay.
And with so much noise in the marketplace and consumers being bombarded by so many ads, you actually know who your consumer is. How do you think about multi-touch attribution in this complicated marketplace?
Well, we look, first of all, it's who are we trying to sell what to? I mean, that's the first thing we're looking at. In what cycle, and then we follow them just the way you think we do. So data and analytics is what we think about a lot. And then what have we got to offer? So I might be, first I need to track you, and then secondly I need to give you something that matters, going back to Ken's piece. And if you are resisting in any way, we have to back off. So that's how we think about it. But we also think about, is the brand overall attractive to you? Do you see the value of this brand beyond anything I could have just transacted with you? Is there a larger picture that you think this is a worthwhile company because we're good on ESG, we're a good employer, you think that our values are the same as yours? These are hard messages to get out because you can't really advertise to that. Oh, we would, by the way, but you can't. So you have to live it every day. You have to show up every day. You can't. You're looking at everything. You're looking at everything from ESG policy to what kind of employer you are, to what the press will write about you, what are political situations that you find yourself in. These things all matter now. I mean, they always mattered, but they matter more because you have the absence of being able to be on network television every night communicating your push message. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you, sir.
You're great, thank you.